Russia's maritime apocalypse. Patrushev is panicking. The West is hunting down Putin's golden ships. The catastrophe can no longer be hidden. The Russian elite is in a panic. The tanker massacre is gaining momentum. The US and Britain are strangling Russia's shadow fleet around the world. Shock. Russia is on the verge of a maritime blockade. The EU, Britain, and the US are already entering the naval battle. Panic in the Kremlin is off the charts. Patrushev is demanding the Navy act against Western privateers. The Western maritime hunt has entered a hot phase. I'll tell you all the details in just a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I am Victoria Panchenko, and here are the latest events. A storm is on the horizon. Nikolai Patrushev predicts maritime turbulence for Russia. The presidential aide and chairman of the Russian Maritime Board paints a grim picture for the Russian merchant fleet. According to him, the West is allegedly embarking on a path of naval warfare. Attacks on Russian ships and cargo in the world's oceans will only intensify. According to
available data, such actions will intensify, and attacks on our ships and cargo will become more frequent.
Patrushev claims that strikes on Russian ships are not chaos, but allegedly part of the West's strategy to strangle Russia's foreign trade. He says it's no longer speculation, but facts. The Kremlin is talking about a real war against the maritime traffic of Russian companies. And they name the British as the main instigators. According to propaganda, it is London that is fueling a wave of maritime piracy that violates international law. The only thing they keep silent about in Russia is that the phrase Russian fleet should automatically be accompanied by the word shadow. Meanwhile, UK Defence Secretary John Healey discussed with his colleagues from Northern Europe and the Baltics the possibility of seizing tankers linked to Russia's shadow fleet. The meeting took place on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference, almost in secret. Defence ministers from 10 countries participated in the meeting. The names are not being disclosed. The head of the armed forces, Richard Knighton, was also present on behalf of the UK. He proposed dividing areas of responsibility. The Royal Navy is ready to operate in the Barents Sea and the North Atlantic against Russian vessels. The British are drawing on US experience, although according to Bloomberg, the US role in London's initiative has not yet been officially defined. But coordination is likely. Britain, the EU, and the US have already imposed restrictions on more than 600 tankers suspected of having ties to Russia. Russia was seriously alarmed, and in early February, the Russian Maritime Board proposed involving Navy ships to protect Russian vessels in the world's oceans. The document has been sent to the head of state. There is no official decision yet, but foreign media claim that military escort is already effectively being carried out.
If we don't give them a tough response, soon the British, the French, and even the Balts will become so brazen that they'll try to completely block our country's access to the seas, at least in the Atlantic basin. According to
Patrushev says that serious forces must be constantly on duty in key areas of the world's oceans, ready to cool the ardor of Western corsairs. The Russian chess game is entering a hot phase. And now a new turn. The US seizes a sanctioned tanker in the Indian Ocean. According to the Pentagon, the military intercepted the vessel Veronica after a pursuit from the Caribbean Sea. According to marine traffic, the tanker sails under the Panamanian flag and was sanctioned for transporting Iranian oil. And another sensation from the EU to finish off the shadow fleet. Such a message came from Brussels. The European Commission has called for a complete ban on providing maritime services to Russia. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen stated the need to strengthen sanctions after meeting with a bipartisan delegation of US senators.
Now is the time to raise the cost of Russia's war to an unprecedented level in order to force Putin to come to the negotiating table with genuine intent. According to her, sanctions are especially effective when coordinated. The new 20th EU sanctions package is expected to target energy, finance, and trade, as well as close loopholes used to circumvent sanctions. We are proposing a complete ban on maritime services, which could further isolate Russia and reduce its fossil fuel revenues, especially if this is closely coordinated with our group of 7 partners, and the United States.
Let me remind you that since the start of the full-scale war, Russia has built up a massive shadow fleet. More than 1,300 tankers are used to circumvent sanctions and sell oil. But now, these vessels are being actively hunted. In January 2026, US and UK special forces seized the tanker Mariner in the North Atlantic. This was followed by the interception and boarding of other ships. Europe is also joining the hunt. At the end of January, the French Navy detained the captain of the tanker Greenwich near the port of Marseille-Fos, although the tanker itself was later released. According to The Guardian, London is considering military scenarios for seizing Shadow Fleet vessels together with NATO allies. Trump's multi-move strategy. The American president openly sings Putin's praises and assures him of friendly intentions, while at the same time, quietly and methodically, he is knocking the chair out from under the Kremlin dictator who is left hanging in an oil noose. Venezuela cooperation with India, attacks on the Shadow Fleet. All of these are points of a single cunning plan. And we're going to show it to you.
Is this friendship or a game of survival?
A very good afternoon to you, my dear neighbor. It is truly wonderful to see you looking so vibrant, alive, and in such excellent health today.
Trump is determined to strangle Russia.
American oil companies will enter Venezuela.
The US president has pulled out the economic and petrodollar noose that Putin feared so much. And
they'll shut down our oil. Well, at least they'll shut it down somehow, although they won't be able to do it. It's simply impossible, in fact, as of today.
Putin's entire economy is tied to one single factor: world oil prices. Venezuela has been part of the game for years.
On the territory of Venezuela, there is, according to geological intelligence, about 20% of the world's oil is located there.
Since 2020, the Russian state company Rosarubezhneft has acquired shares in almost all of the country's key oil projects. For Moscow, this was strategic gold. The Kremlin gained leverage over the total volume of oil on the world market.
Venezuela served as an important representative of interests, if you will, of the countries of the global south, and above all of China and the Russian Federation on the continent.
Many countries were hooked on Putin's oil needle. But after the operation in Venezuela and the arrest of Nicolas Maduro, this scheme fell apart.
Maduro is a staunch supporter of Putin, among other things. And this, of course, will undoubtedly hit Putin because it goes through the oil tanker fleet. A lot of Russian oil, including Venezuelan oil, is processed at refineries and then sold to the very same United States of America. So you might find yourself wondering exactly what the Russian Federation or Vladimir Putin could possibly have to do with this situation. But the surprising reality of the matter is that the United States is still actively buying their raw materials, just through the use of various Venezuelan refineries.
The fate of Venezuela's oil fields now depends entirely on the administration of Donald Trump.
Oil and gas are not our advantage. As you can see, both oil and gas prices can fall. Our advantage is Putin.
India is one of the world's largest oil buyers. It supported the Kremlin thanks to its purchases. But that won't happen anymore. Modi will start buying oil from Venezuela in exchange for a trade deal with the US.
He agreed to stop buying Russian oil and to buy much more from the United States and potentially from Venezuela. This will help end the war in Ukraine, which is ongoing right now with thousands dying every week.
Trump reached an agreement with Modi that the US will lower tariffs on Indian imports from 25% to 18%, and India will move toward a complete removal of tariffs and non-tariff barriers for imports from the US. Let us recall that in August, Trump imposed tariffs of 50% on goods from India, which included a 25% surcharge as a penalty for purchasing Russian oil. That's why such a deal is very relevant for Modi. He also promised to buy more than $50 billion worth of American products.
When two large economies and the world's biggest democratic countries work together, it benefits our peoples and opens up tremendous opportunities for mutual cooperation.
This will deal a serious blow to the Kremlin, since it was India that became the largest maritime buyer of Russian oil after 2022, and that oil was being sold at a discount. This money was one of the key ways to replenish the Russian budget at a time when sales of Russian gas and oil to the West had been halted.
if, so to speak, the balance on the world markets changes, and such a large share of production essentially comes under the control of the United States, of course, the US increases its strategic and monetary stability. The oil and petroleum products market will depend on the will of Washington and be influenced by it. It will affect global prices, especially for Brent crudes.
Trump did not stop there. The US president stated that China could also make a great deal with the US to buy Venezuelan oil. According to Trump, Cuba will also want to sign an oil purchase deal.
It is impossible to imagine that the loss of, say, Russian oil volumes would allow the global energy sector and the world economy to remain stable.
It is worth noting that for the US to exert significant pressure, they would have to invest in Venezuela, which has been left to fend for itself for years.
He actually did not develop and sometimes even destroyed or at least neglected what had already been created before him in terms of oil production. And these 18% of the world's oil is just a nominal figure. Investing in it would require millions of dollars.
Venezuelan oil in Trump's hands would drive down prices and push Russian oil out of Western countries. And accordingly, Putin will never again see the kind of revenues that existed before. This means the end has come for the global ambitions of the Kremlin dictator.
We need to keep hitting them. The EU is preparing a new major package of sanctions specifically against third countries, against buyers of Russian oil and against oil refineries.
Well, we will continue to do our job, push for sanctions, and strike the enemy on the battlefield.
The hunt for Russia's shadow fleet continues. The EU is considering a complete ban on providing maritime services to Russia in order to block Putin's shadow fleet. And the British Navy chased away a Russian vessel that had stopped near underwater cables. Here are the details.
The EU will not provide maritime services to Russian ships. This ban will be included in the 20th package of sanctions.
Basically, every vessel that arrives at sea relies on certain logistical points. That's why there are so few trips to Antarctica. Because there is no logistics. Not because it's dangerous or cold there, but because there is no logistics there.
According to the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Keikal, the main package of sanctions is planned to be adopted on February 24th. It will also include measures in the energy sector and regarding fertilizer trade.
If the European Union's maritime infrastructure stops servicing Russian ships, it will make navigation much more difficult for them. This is especially true in certain hotspots. Important routes, like those in Northern Europe, are key examples. Rotterdam, the largest port in Europe and one of the biggest ports in the world, plays a major role in this situation. Across the continent of Europe, along the vast eastern Atlantic coast, and throughout the entire Mediterranean Sea. Furthermore, consider the additional fact that various Russian naval ships often operate not only between Russia and China, but also to European ports, which accordingly will now be closed to them. This means serious losses.
The French Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jean-Noël Barrot, clarified that the sanctions will include especially tough measures specifically targeting Russia's shadow fleet, with the aim of completely blocking the movement of Russian shadow vessels.
The fact that we are seeing procedures for detaining certain vessels from the Russian shadow fleet, we need to understand that if there are actually fewer than 24 distinct such precedents, well, let's just say there are 24 cases in total, and that accounts for a mere 1% fraction of the entire operational naval fleet. It is not so much a direct physical action as it is a symbolic signal, a clear message that the situation could potentially escalate and get much worse, or that they should reevaluate and change their current behavior. It is truly nothing more than that.
On January 27th, 14 countries of the Baltic and North Seas issued a joint statement. In it, they warned that they intend to hinder the activities of Russia's shadow fleet tankers. Vessels without clear national affiliation will be considered stateless ships, which gives coastal countries the right to detain and inspect them.
But this is not only related. It is important to note that this relates to the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, formally first and foremost, but in fact, This resurgence was determined by and became a direct consequence of the increasingly aggressive military actions taken by Russia in the Baltic Sea, the Mediterranean, and the North Sea, where Russians, or more precisely, various ships associated with their interests, have been remarkably active across these regions. This involves working directly with various Russian ship owners and numerous entities closely affiliated with the Russian Federation, who are currently and generally operating under heavy international sanctions imposed by the European Union, the United States of America, the United Kingdom, and the nation of Ukraine, are, from our point of view, essentially carrying out acts of sabotage. On
Wednesday, January 29th, the Royal Navy of Britain tracked a suspicious Russian vessel that spent nearly 14 hours almost directly above the undersea data transmission cables in the Bristol Channel.
And as a result, those same detentions, the strategic operations of Shadow Fleet tankers that were actively fleeing from the US Coast Guard were successfully carried out with the full support and close cooperation of the British government. Similarly, the detention of a Shadow Fleet tanker by the French was also conducted in coordination with the British. The government of the United Kingdom is currently the most extensively and deeply involved official governmental organization within the scope of these specific operations.
Some countries have already started to independently hinder the Russian Shadow Fleet. French Navy ships detained the tanker Grinch, which according to French authorities was coming from Russia under complex flags. German authorities did not allow an unregistered vessel, absent from any database, into the Baltic Sea. The tanker Arkuset, which was heading to the Gulf of Finland. According to Bloomberg, after that, 2 other oil tankers from Murmansk turned around off the coast of Norway and headed back.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
And now there's another problem. Russia is up to its ears in debt. Over the past 20 years, the foreign debt of the aggressor country has reached a record high for the last 2 decades. Due to sanctions and economic problems, Russian companies are operating at a loss. Our journalists will tell you whether there is a way out of this situation and on what terms.
Russia owes nearly $62 billion to foreign creditors, which is a record for the past 20 years. Russia's external debt includes government obligations to non-residents in foreign currency. This is part of the country's total external debt, which also includes debts owed by banks, state and private companies, as well as various organizations.
Major Western financial institutions and creditors have essentially frozen a vast amount of Russian sovereign assets. Consequently, to put it in very simple terms, Russia is currently not paying back the several $billion in debt that it officially owes to various other countries around the world.
As of January 1st, 2026, the Bank of Russia estimated the country's external debt at $319.8 billion. In just 1 year, it increased by $30 billion, or 10.4%.
Furthermore, it is also important to note that the international export markets for various Russian products are shrinking. China is buying less and less coal. It has almost completely stopped buying steel. As many of you are likely aware, everyone knows exactly what is currently happening with global oil prices. In fact, the market price of Russian crude oil has practically dropped by almost half of its previous value.
Due to sanctions and a collapsing economy, Russian companies have suffered a record loss of 7.5 trillion rubles, the highest in history. Since 2023, this figure has almost doubled.
The cost of servicing loans in Russia is very high, and the interest they pay is written off as production costs. As a result, production costs rise sharply. Furthermore, the international export markets for various Russian products are shrinking.
According to Rostat data, the metallurgical and oil refining industries are suffering the most. Wholesale trade and mineral extraction. Developers, transport engineering enterprises, and the light industry are also experiencing difficulties.
Different factors can have an impact on different industries and sectors. It depends on the domestic market. For example, if we look at developers, they build apartments, but no one is buying them. Accordingly, there is a crisis among developers and builders, and there's no end in sight. The largest company that was building housing has practically given up. It asked the government to cover its losses, but most likely the answer will be negative. And this is the first candidate for bankruptcy, a major bankruptcy.
A decline in investment and an exodus of depositors from banks. Such a fate for his country was predicted by the deputy chairman of the State Duma Committee on Economic Policy, Nikolai Patrushev. Patrushev also stated that the central bank and the government are colluding to hide the real inflation rate. At the same time, the budget is currently short by 5 trillion rubles.
First of all, congratulations on that.
And what do you think about the latest events? We look forward to your comments. There's more to come. Stay informed about the main news and don't forget to like, and may there be peaceful skies above your head.